Hello and welcome to the Parents Podcast, brought to you by UCAS. This is your essential guide to everything when it comes to university applications. My name is John Smith, and today we are taking a look at a really important day in the application cycle. We're talking results day. So how can you be best placed to support the young person in your life, whether they've got the grades that they wanted, or maybe they'll be looking at other options like clearing? Well, let's get into this with the help of my guest. On today's episode, I'm joined by Sarah Harker-Bettridge, who is the admissions manager at Birmingham City University. Hi, Sarah. Thanks very much for coming in and being a part of the episode. Now, I know that you know admissions inside and out a bit, don't you? So tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm the admissions manager at Birmingham City University and have been for a couple of years. Prior to that, I worked at the University of Derby, and I've been there for sort of going on 7 years. So yeah, nearly a decade, purely in admissions. So yeah, I know admissions inside and out.
Okay, we've got the right person to help us out today on the podcast. So let's get into this. We're going to take a look at lots of the elements of results day. But I think before we even get to that day, we should talk about how you best prepare for it, because there's a lot of building up to it, isn't there? So what's your advice there for parents?
Yeah, so I think really, once your sort of child's made their choice of the university, they may have accepted their offer. At that point, it feels like there's not a lot else to do with UCAS. And to an extent, that's right. You know, they need to focus on their exams or coursework and all that sort of stuff. But I think that interim period is really good as a parent to have a sit down with your child and have a think about other options. Not that you want to have to go to that, but on results day, you've got enough pressure, you're processing the results that your child's received. And I think it's really useful to go into that having an idea of whether you maybe want to look at other universities potentially, and have an idea of which ones, if so that you're going in there at least as prepared as you can be.
So tell me a bit about the day then, Sarah, how it works as a parent. Am I staying up till midnight? What can I expect in terms of the timings?
So, no, don't stay up till midnight. Get some sleep if you can. You won't get results. So results won't be released until 8 a.m. That's a rule across the board. So there's no point staying up late. Just try and be up and ready for 8 a.m. Like I said, you might be that you get your results through UCAS, so you can see whether you've actually got into your university first. But in terms of collecting your actual A-level, BTEC, whatever it is, results, that would be through school or college. So it might be that you get them via email or go and pick them up. But the best thing to do is to contact the school or college themselves, and they'll be able to help you with how to do that.
And then clearing, that all happens a little bit later on in the day.
Yeah, so clearing, you can't actually apply for any courses that are available in clearing until 1 p.m. on results day. So it's really useful to take that morning just to have a think and consider all options before you actually go ahead and start applying. You can ring universities before 1 p.m, so they will be open to have conversations with, which is useful, but you can't actually apply on UCAS until after 1 p.m.
I guess that is about having a conversation, because there's a line, isn't there? You want to show that you've got faith in that person in your life, but also being prepared as well. Have you got any advice on how you juggle all of that?
Yeah, no, not really. Nothing mega. I think the thing is to stay calm. I think full stop is to stay calm. And I think it depends on your experience, I think, as a parent as well, whether you've been to university. If you have, you may have some more knowledge. For example, my parents had never been to university, so they couldn't offer a lot of guidance. So I think it was useful for them to familiarise themselves. And I know that UCAS and universities themselves have sort of information for parents and carers. And I think it's useful to familiarise yourself with that so that you know the process, particularly going into such a busy and hectic day.
Okay, so let's get on to the day itself then, because there can be a lot to take in. What can I expect as a parent going into results day?
So I think one thing that maybe not all parents realise is that your child and you may know whether they've got into university prior to actually receiving the results. So usually what happens is around 8 o'clock in the morning, UCAS ends what's known as its embargo. So it means that you can log in and have a look at your UCAS hub. And what that normally means is that if you have been accepted to your firm or insurance choice, it would show on that. So you may know before even going to get your results whether you've been accepted. That doesn't necessarily mean that your child has got the results that they needed for the university, so much as the university is able to accept them. But just to know that when you go to get your results, if you've been accepted, you've been accepted on those results. So that's your first thing really, is to check UCAS, see what happens there, go and get your results. And then from there, you need to decide whether you're happy, your child's happy, they want to go to the university they chose, which hopefully they do. But if not, you've got those other universities you've maybe thought about or other options that you've thought about prior to then maybe start calling round.
And is this the same across the board? Whatever you're expecting when it comes to results, do they come at the same time?
Depends on the qualification. So A-levels will normally come through on results day, but it might be that you're taking an international baccalaureate, Scottish qualifications, BTECs, and especially ones that are coursework based. So such as BTECs, you may be receiving those results, or your child will be throughout the course of their studies. So although they might not have an overall final grade, they should know what they're sort of aiming towards. So it might be that comes before the results day in August, in which case you can get in touch with the universities in advance and they'll be able to advise. But clearing, in theory, can still work the same for them.
And we're going to talk a bit about clearing later on as well, which is a big part of that day. Any advice on, support then if maybe you log into UCAS and or your child logs in and it's not quite what they were expecting and it's not the result straight away, and then they've got to go through the stress then going to get their results?
Yeah, I think that maybe causes a little bit of panic if you're logging in, you're not into your university. But I think it's really useful to know that clearing, which can sound a bit terrifying, and I know it can have some maybe negative connotations, really isn't that scary. As a university, so as institutes, we prepare for clearing all year. I talk about it all year, ready for the next year. So we really know our stuff. And I think that's what you need to remember, is that you're not on your own. I mean, the school will probably be able to give you some guidance as well, but there's UCAS, there's institutions. So there's so much help out there. It's just having to think about what you want to do next.
How can you best support your child emotionally on that day when there's so much going on, and no doubt you're going to have those emotions going on as well?
Yeah, I think it's just to stay calm and just try to take a breather, which I know is easier said than done. But I think also it's knowing that you don't have to. So clearing itself, which I know we'll touch on, in theory, you can't apply for any clearing places until 1 p.m. on the day. So that really gives you the time to think. So it's not a case of, I've not got my results, I need to ring at 8:30, otherwise I'm not going to get into university. There's time to really think. So I think it's worth taking that and going home, or going to the pub if that's what you want to do, and just taking that time to have a think, and then going into it with logical decisions.
Because that is the thing, there will be managing a bit of disappointment, but also on the flip side of that, hopefully celebrating successes as well. It's important that you do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And either way, I think it's just being prepared for that, and hopefully more often than not it will be a success.
Yeah, absolutely. If though you are in that position where your child hasn't got the grades that they were expecting and that they were hoping for, what should you do? What's the kind of the first step, the first thing that you're thinking about on that day?
So it depends on whether you've been accepted or your child's been accepted to the university, I think. So in theory, you'd know that before you get the results. If they've been accepted, then there's nothing to worry about to an extent. If they're still wanting to go to that university, they'll have been accepted regardless of not having those grades. If they haven't been accepted by their firm or their insurance choice, at that point, clearing becomes the thing that you need to start thinking about. And that's where you need to consider other options, and really you need to start having a look at other universities to see what tariffs or what entry grades they require in clearing, and see whether your child would meet those.
But there will be situations where the university will accept a child who maybe hasn't got the results they were expecting.
Yeah, so it may be that they're accepted onto the course, which is ideal. Sometimes universities will drop their entry criteria if they still have places available after they've gone through everyone that met the offer. And it may be that they've also considered alternatives. So in my experience at Birmingham City University, we would, if we've not able to make you an offer for the course you've applied for, we might consider a foundation year if there's an applicable one, or an alternative course. So we still try to give the child that place that we can. If an alternative offer is made, it's just worth knowing that you don't have to accept it. So just because they've done that doesn't mean that you have to go with it. It's just, in most instances, it's to try and show you that we still want your child to come to us. It's just maybe that original course wasn't the best fit for them.
A foundation year. Can you tell me a bit more about what that means then, if you are in a position where your child's been offered that?
Yeah, so let's take a business studies course, for example. They might have applied for a degree, which would be 3 years, and a foundation year would be a 4-year course. So it would add an additional year of study on. But what it does is sort of bridge that gap between A-levels or BTECs or whatever sort of level 3 qualifications have been studied and getting onto that degree. So it eases them in a little bit more where they may have struggled with A-levels rather than throwing them into the next step.
This is great, Lucy, because we're going behind the scenes, because you know this inside and out. And for many parents, it can feel like this sort of mystical thing that happens in the background, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my parents didn't go to university, so they would have had no idea about this. So it's really, I think it's useful contacting UCAS and your institutions because we know it inside out and we're here to help.
So we've talked a bit about foundation years. Are there any other opportunities or pathways if maybe it hasn't quite gone to plan on results day?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what your child wants to do, fundamentally, is what it comes down to. So if they're wanting to be a teacher, there's only certain courses that they can do, or it might be that they do a different degree and then look at doing a PGCE. So it really depends on the route. But, what I think you need to do is consider whether it's the university that was important, if it was a course that was important, if it was both, and then see what you need to do to get there. So it might be that your child doesn't go to university that year, maybe defers a year, or goes to do like an access to higher education qualification or something to sort of get that grades that they need to get in. But it's just to take that time and consider all options.
All of this sounds to me like it's happening quite quickly, right? When you're building up and you've got this year and you're going by and you're doing your personal statement, it all happens, and then you know what's happening, and then things can change quite quickly on that day. How can you help your child make an informed decision when it might feel like things are moving quite quickly for everyone involved?
Yeah, I think that's where it's key that you're looking sort of pre-results day to see what other options you'd be interested in, your child will be interested in, and really get to the core of why they want to go, where they want to go, and why they want to study what they want to study, because that's ultimately what it's going to boil down to on results day. If they don't get the results they want, or they want to change their mind, it's that stuff that's key. And I know as an 18-year-old, it can feel like that's your entire life, and it is important. But I think as an adult, and the parent, you can take a step back and maybe see that just taking that extra bit of time, even if it's a couple of days, it's not the end of the world. And I think it's really important rather than just rushing headlong.
Yeah, and I guess, when you're prioritizing the options that you now have, that can be quite difficult as well to compare things where, again, things might have been thrown at you quite quickly. Have you got any advice when it comes to helping your child when it comes to prioritizing?
Yeah, so I think it's just have a conversation with them. I don't think it even needs to be specifically about university. It could be about friends and everything, because I know that we get a lot of students that maybe have friends that are going there where they want to go, and that has a real impact on it. So I think it's just having those conversations and seeing also what they want to do after university, because that really is the first step into it. And I think that's really key to get them focused on the future to then see what actually is the best fit for now.
With all of this, there will be an element of wanting to help and wanting to be supportive as a parent, but also this is about their next step. It's about a step into adulthood and making their own decisions. How would you advise you best manage that, not kind of stepping on any toes, but being there and helping where you can for your child?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one.
Yeah.
I think it's getting them to have some responsibility. So I think it's really useful that they're used to speaking on the phones and things, particularly if they end up speaking to any universities or institutions over the phone for clearing. Most universities operate a hotline, so it would be phone calls. So I think it's really key to just get them ready for that next stage and get into that responsible element that maybe they've not had before.
Yeah, and that's, a big thing, isn't it? Picking up the phone for the first time. We're all picking up phones perhaps less than we were. So it sounds like some of those basic life skills as well, getting used to some of that.
Absolutely. I think it's really, really key. And also when they go to university, they're probably going to have to ring the doctors for themselves and, all that sort of stuff. So the sooner they can sort of get those skills and be comfortable with it, the better.
We've talked a bit about clearing already, but I think we should talk about it in a little bit more detail. So where exactly does that fit into results day? Because we've already talked about some of the timings, but tell me about clearing a little bit more specifically.
So clearing is really there for anyone really. So whether you've not got the results you want, you've got the results you want, or you've got better than you wanted, it's there for you to consider other options. So clearing is where universities will go into clearing if they still have places available on courses after we've received results for students. So it means that a lot of universities are in clearing. It's not a negative thing. I think previously it probably was considered to be negative. It's not anymore. A lot of students come through clearing because it gives you it's a fully transparent service, really. You can see everyone that's got places, what they're taking people at, and it really gives you that sort of full picture of what your child may be able to study and where.
And I suppose you've touched on it there a little bit. Do you think there was a stigma clearing? Do you think that's changing now? Is the message getting out there that it is not just that kind of last minute option?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly when I went to university, however long ago, it was seen as a negative. It was seen as just you only went through it if you didn't get the grades you wanted. And I certainly don't think that's the case now. If I was advising my own child, I would be saying to consider clearing. It may be that you don't want to use it and, you get the grades, you go to the university you wanted and you chose originally, and that's fine. But I think it's definitely worth considering the options that are out there.
Just reiterate, when would your child be eligible then for clearing? How does that all fall into place?
So if they've applied in the main cycle, which means they've applied by the end of January, that would mean that they would choose a firm and insurance choice. And at that point, that sits with the university until results day. You are then eligible for clearing, in theory, from results day onwards if you've not been accepted to either of those universities. If you've been accepted but you don't wish to go to them, you can release into clearing, which basically means that you're free to go, in theory, wherever you want. And that might be that you return back to your original institute. We wouldn't recommend that that's the way that you do it, but it might be after some consideration that that's what you want to do. But in theory, it's results day onwards.
Are there any risks in doing that with that place if you have got an offer? How does that balance work?
So I think if you're wanting to stay at the institution, even if it's a change course or just to have a conversation, I think you're better to ring them because they can change things 9 times out of 10 on their end or with UCAS rather than lose that place and then have to sort of start the process again.
I suppose on the flip side of that, you might be in a position where your child has done better than they were expecting. Does clearing work on that side of things?
Yeah, it works both ways, absolutely. Now, maybe depending on the sort of institute they want to go to, if they've done better, there might be less places. But absolutely, I think it's worth considering all options.
And what about the top universities? Are they all on there as well?
Yeah, probably not Oxford and Cambridge, but certainly some of sort of the higher, what were known as the Russell Group universities, certainly some of them are on there, maybe not for that long. They might only be on there for the day, if that, just to try and fill the few places they've got. But absolutely, it's worth having a look.
Let's do some top tips, right? For you yourself, managing your own emotions as a parent on the day, as someone who's been on the other side of it, answering the phones and helping parents and families through it. What would your advice be to a parent?
It is to stay calm. It's to be prepared, and it's to try and, like I say, just coach your child. I think to try and get them used to having those conversations and to have their qualifications, know what they've got. I know that sounds really basic, but BTECs, there's like thousands. It feels like. And I think it's really useful if your child can say, yeah, I've studied this specific thing, this is the grade I've got, and that's how the university that you're ringing will be able to help you the best.
Okay. And what about supporting your child through it then?
Emotional support, I think, is key. I've said before, I'm from Yorkshire, we don't do emotions particularly well. I think it's really key that you are just there and able to provide that. Even if you don't know the process so much yourself, I think it's just really useful that you can be there and offer that advice. And also seek it yourself. There's a lot of parental information everywhere. And I think it's useful to have that.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for coming in and joining me on the podcast today. It's been great to go under the bonnet and find out a little bit about how it all works. Because as I say, it can be, a really stressful and a really scary day. But I think you've helped put our minds at ease a little bit. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
And thank you very much as well for joining us for this edition of the Parents Podcast, brought to you by UCAS. We've gone under the bonnet of Results Day with some really helpful hints and tips. I do hope you'll join me again next time.
Stay informed with expert advice straight to your inbox. Sign up now for key updates, deadlines and guidance to help you support your young person with confidence.